So thank you, everyone. Let me just say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. So I'm delighted to be able to welcome you to today's Asia Pacific Stats Cafe. And I'm Rachel Bevan, Director of Statistics Division here at ESCAP in Bangkok. And I'm joined today by a couple of other speakers, so hopefully you can see them online as well. We've got Natalie Ball and we've got Venant, who's from Rwanda, but I will introduce them in a minute. So let me just say, as we begin, if you could keep microphones on mute if you're not speaking. We are going to hear from two speakers today, and then we'll have time at the end for questions. But as we go through, it will be really helpful if you can add any questions, not just questions, but any comments, thoughts, reflections into the chat bar. So do please kind of, engage as we go along. That would be great, so that when we get to the question section, hopefully we'll have some already there. So thank you so much, everyone. So as you know, today we're looking at the issue of statelessness. And a couple of weeks ago, I was in the Philippines at their second civil registration and vital statistics event. And at that event in particular, I heard Senator the Honourable Grace Poe Liamanzares, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that, but she was sharing about her experience when she was actually running for president in the Philippines. And then she was stopped from running because she could not prove her nationality. And she was actually a foundling, so she had no knowledge of who her parents were. She had no legal documentation of her birth and no information about her parents. And so she really campaigned very hard in the Philippines, and they've now actually adopted a law there which ensures that children who are abandoned in the Philippines are assumed to have Filipino nationality. And that means that they're actually given those rights that they need, and that makes so much of a difference to them as they go through their lives. So I just wanted to start by saying that, because we know that, that's just one of the groups of stateless people. And we know from today's session, we'll be hearing more about other groups of stateless people. But we know as well from this, that this is an issue that affects lots of people's lives. So it does really matter. Back in 2016, at the 47th session of the UN Statistical Commission, they took the decision to actually establish an expert group on refugees and internally displaced peoples, and that went on to become the IROSS group. So in that initial mandate, this group was tasked with actually developing some international recommendations on, first of all, they looked at refugee statistics, and those were developed and then were endorsed at the UN Statistical Commission back in 2018. Having worked on that review and worked on recommendations for refugee statistics, the group then expanded and looked at work on developing international recommendations for internationally displaced people, so internally displaced statistics. And they were looking particularly at that group of people, within a country who may be moving for a whole variety of different reasons. So the recommendations from those were then endorsed at UN Statistics Commission in March 2020, and the manual was then actually put together for the implementation of the recommendations on the refugees and on internally displaced statistics. So having looked at both of those groups, the group then looked at the third area, and it was really looking at how to actually strengthen both of those, looking at how do we strengthen national statistical capacity in this area, how do we make sure we provide the right technical support, and to make sure that we can actually apply these international statistical recommendations on refugees and internally displaced peoples. And that means then that the group's actually moved on a bit now, and they've actually expanded their terms of reference. And so the group is now called the Expert Group on Refugees, Internally Displaced Peoples and Statelessness Statistics. I was going to say I was going to try and avoid using acronyms throughout what I say. However, on this occasion, I will use the acronym because clearly that's a bit of a mouthful. So that group's called IROSS, and they're really looking, and they've been mandated to develop these international recommendations on statelessness statistics. So covering all those different groups that we've actually been just hearing about then. And they are actually going to submit the recommendations to the Statistical Commission at the next session, the 54th session, which will be held in 2023. And just a little bit later on, we'll be hearing from Natalie Ball, who you can see on the screen now, and she is the head of the EGRIS Secretariat. But what we want to do today at this Stats Cafe is to really hear a bit more about the international recommendations on statelessness statistics group. So I'm really hearing a bit more about how they've been developing the guidance, and also about how that guidance is actually being used. And the real purpose as well today of this Statistics Cafe is to actually look at how we can actually shape that guidance. So UN Statistics Division are facilitating a global consultation on the new guidance, and they're really keen to actually hear from different stakeholders, including the wider group of national statistics officers, and they really want to hear about the scope, the coverage and the content of these recommendations to make sure that the recommendations that they're developing and the guidance are as useful as possible for countries. So we do have a really great opportunity today to actually shape that guidance, to make sure that it is really useful for what you're doing at your country level, but also that it's showcasing some really good examples of work that you might be doing already within your countries as well. So we're going to start today with hearing from one country about how they are actually implementing these recommendations from a national perspective. And that country, unusually for us in an Asia Pacific Stats Cafe, but really great, is that we've got Rwanda, who are sharing their experience. And they've been involved in the kind of global consultation. So they've got some great experience to share. So we're going to hear first of all from Venant Habarugira, who's the Director of Census at the National Institute of Statistics of Rwanda. And once we've heard from Venant, we will then be moving over to Natalia to hear from her about the recommendations more generally and about how we can support the global consultation. So without me saying too much more, I want to hand over to Venant to hear from Rwanda about the work that you've been doing. So as I said, please just do put your comments in the chat bar as we go through, but over to you, Venant. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel, and good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Venant Habarugira, the Director of Census at the National Institute of Statistics of Rwanda. I'm here delighted to present our country experience toward the endless of statelessness in Rwanda, as it is a global mandate for our country, but also for the worldwide to protect stateless persons. It's up to us, but for you also to protect that people, which is a part of our people which is very vulnerable. I can say that we can. In my presentation, I will focus on our country experience, but also a little bit on the general objectives of including statelessness statistics in the censuses and the surveys. My presentation will be very short, and I will try to meet the time. Next, please. It is in line with the global commitment to leave no one behind, as it is highlighted in the 23 agenda for SDGs. It is in this line that stateless statistics are in need just to address the statelessness phenomena worldwide. There are a number of reasons of the inclusion of statelessness population or statistics. One is the identification, as I said, stateless person is a very vulnerable group and a very teeny group of people that is limited. But having statistics on statelessness persons and people at risk will allow to identify them and know the scale of the problems in the country, but also knowing the profile of population affected is paramount. For instance, knowing the size, location, possible cause, social, demographic, and economic status of that group of people is very important. The second one is for the prevention, just to address the cause of statelessness by, for example, adopting safeguards in the nationality laws, but also promoting countries' accession to the 1961 Convention. The third objective is the reduction by supporting legislative change, but also improvement to procedures to allow stateless person to acquire nationality and help individual take advantages of these changes. The fourth one is about the protection. As I said, stateless person is a very vulnerable group of people. So this allow to intervene to help stateless people to enjoy rights by changing the usual lives because they are sometimes limited to some of the service benefiting other people. So in this regard, it is good to intervene to help a stateless person to enjoy their rights by changing their usual lives. Next, please. In Rwanda, we have the stateless person are mainly long-term refugees from neighboring countries, especially those whose birth are not registered or who cannot trace nationality of the parent due to lack of civil status and the nationality documentation. This is the main reason we have some people that are statelessness or at risk of being statelessness in the country. Many of these long-term refugees and the children are eligible for Rwandan nationality, whether through an acquisition process based on their birth or habitual residence in Rwanda or by naturalization by the government. Next. Since 2006, Rwanda has been a part of both 1954 and the 1961 stateless conventions. And from there, many consultations have been held at the regional level and international level, addressing the statelessness phenomena. For instance, in 2017, we have been part of the International Conference on the Great Lakes region of experts on stateless held in Kinshasa. That's agreed on the preparation of declaration of the eradication of statelessness and the regional action plan, but also the nomination selection of stateless focal person at the country level. It's about 12 countries. By 2019, we had a ministerial level meeting of Minister of Foreign Affairs. In that meeting, held in Brazzaville, they had a declaration, Brazzaville Declaration on the Eradication of Statelessness in the Great Lakes region, and the action plan from 2017 to 2019, and this action plan was expanded to up to 2024. We had also a ministerial conference on eradication of stateless in Kenya. The key outcome of this conference were an indicative pledge made by countries to eradicate stateless in the respective countries, and the extension of the action plan until 2024, as I said. And the one of next. In this conference is where Rwanda committed to eradicate statelessness within its territory by 2024, and they made about 80 pledges. The pledge number one is the establishment of a national task force on stateless by February 2020. The pledge number two was about the preparation and adoption of a national action plan to eradicate statelessness. The pledge number three was about enacting the nationality registration to facilitate access to naturalization for stateless persons. The pledge number four was about including questions and a section on statelessness in the 2022 National Population Census conducted in recently in August 2022. Next. The pledge number five was about granting or confirming Rwandan nationality to all stateless persons and their descendants living in Rwanda by 2024. The pledge number six was about improving access to rate birth registration for refugees born in Rwanda. The pledge number seven was about ensure that former refugees of Rwanda origin who opted for local integration in the respective host countries are issued with nationality documentation by 2024. And the pledge number eight was about to contribute to the adoption and the subsequent ratification by Rwanda of protocol to the African Charter on Human and the People's Rights on a specific aspect of the right of nationality and the eradication of stateless in Africa. These are the 8 pledges that's made by our country to face the phenomena of statelessness in the country. Next. So far, after the pledge commitment made by the country, there is a number of efforts made by the country to eradicate statelessness in the country. Rwanda has a comprehensive safeguard against childhood statelessness. In the nationality codes, we have a provision extending nationality to children who would otherwise be statelessness, and a provision extending nationality to children born to foreign nationals inside Rwanda territory who are unable to acquire nationality of their parent. We have also multiplied efforts to ensure universal birth registration for all those born in the country, with a simplification of rate-based registration procedures. Also, efforts are being done to ensure that all refugees born on Rwanda territory have been registered. Next. The current progress toward the eradication of statelessness. One of the questions we would ask to address the issue of statelessness in the country is about who are they, how many are they, where are they, how are they living, and one of the possible answers is through surveys and census and administrative record, like the CRVS system that will allow to address the statelessness issue in the country. And with the current status, to date, we have a lot of progress have been done. For instance, the nationality law reforms are ongoing to address the issue of statelessness. But also, we have established a national stateless task force team to address this issue by preparing the questionnaire methodology, but also the implementation of a surveys that will respond to statelessness people in the country, especially identification to know who are they, how many are they, where they are, and to elucidate to some of the cause of statelessness in the country. We had established also a national action plan to address the issue of statelessness, but also to respond to the aim of having eradicated statelessness by 2024. As I said, there is a section on statelessness that was included in the August 2022 population and housing census, just to understand the magnitude of statelessness in the country, but also elucidate the living conditions of stateless person or people at risk of being statelessness in the country. We have completed the data collection on 30th August. Now we are doing the analysis. By the analysis, we will show the magnitude of statelessness phenomenon in the country. We are also planning to have a mini census to deepen the understanding, but also for a quick solution toward the eradication of statelessness in the country. We had the limitation with the census, because in the census we have to respect the confidentiality. In the census we will show the magnitude of the phenomena, but we will not share the names of people suffering or exposed to statelessness or at risk of being statelessness. It is with the mini census that we are planning to conduct, that we will have the whole information of stateless person, but also we will provide the quick solutions towards eradication of statelessness person using the mini census, because it will give all information differently from the census. So far, for this mini census, we have conducted trainings of all local authorities, enumerators, and all other stakeholders. And we are to conduct the mini census after the publication of census results, preliminary results in December 2022. Next. You can ask the key success factors in our aim of eradicating statelessness by 2024 in Rwanda. One of the key factors is the political will and the government commitment to address this issue at the national level. But also there are, as I said, there are pledges and the commitment for the regional and the African continent. That's the country is advocating to address this issue at global wide. We can also highlight the stakeholder engagement, such as the government of Rwanda, UNHCR, regional office, the Directorate of Immigration and Immigration, the National Identification Agency, local government, Human Rights Commission, but also the Statistical Office. They are putting together efforts to address the issue, especially for the lack of data, but also the harmonization of laws regarding nationality, the nationality law. We can also highlight the regional and the global consultation. As I said, it started by the Great Lakes regions, about 12 countries, but also at the African continent. Also, the consultations are helping countries to address this issue, but also to have an action plan to eradicate the stateless person. We can also mention the public awareness, including advocacy for the right for all, local community awareness, including stateless persons, where we advocate them to let themselves identified and recognized, because sometimes the stateless persons are marginalized in the community. Sometimes they are reluctant to say about the status in the country, because they are fearing of procedures of deportation and some others marginalization in the country. But the country is trying to advocate them to let themselves identified and enumerated. So as I said, we conducted the mini, we are planning to conduct the mini census. Meanwhile, we had the pilot census, which was successful, where we have chosen some spot area where we think there is a high number of stateless persons, and we can say that's people, because of the public awareness and the sensitization of local authority, stateless persons are willing to participate in any surveys relating to the identification. Next.
Thank you. Can I just ask you to, yeah, perfect.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Perfect, Simon. Thank you so much for sharing your experiencing. And it's really, really useful to kind of hear what you're sharing about the kind of complexity of the whole issue, and particularly as well kind of highlighting the need to kind of work not just within your own country boundaries as well, because this is an issue obviously that affects countries nearby and across whole regions. So I'm now going to pass it over to Natalia Ball, who, as I said, is the head of the EGRIS Secretariat, and she's going to share a bit more on the kind of international recommendations on statelessness statistics. So if I can ask you, Natalie, to take over, but also be aware we want to try and leave 15 minutes or so at the end for questions, and also we do need to finish on time, not least because over in this part of the world it's getting later. But thank you so much. So let me pass over to you. Thanks.
Many thanks, Rachel, and also to Venant for such an interesting and rich presentation on Rwanda's experience. I'm going to present, maybe you can already go to the next slide there, Karis. I'm going to present a little bit, just briefly introducing EGRIS for those of you who might not be so familiar with us, complementing and just going into a little bit more detail from what Rachel shared at the beginning. But the main purpose of my presentation is to share with you the progress made so far on the development of the international recommendations on statelessness statistics, building on the country experiences from Venant and many other peers around the world. To highlight and share with you a little bit what's in the current draft. And then the main focus of my presentation is really to welcome everyone here and beyond the walls of this webinar, to engage and partake in the global consultation that is starting today and is open for the next month. So then towards the end of my presentation, I'll just share a little bit in terms of practicalities around the global consultation, and we'll definitely have time for Q&A. Thanks. To go to the next slide. Okay, great. As Rachel said up front, the expert group is on refugee IDP and statelessness statistics, was set up in 2016 and is currently in its third mandate. Our first focus was on refugee statistics. Our second focus was on IDP statistics, and both of those are very much continuing and growing stronger in the implementation stages. During this third phase, our third mandate that takes us to the end of 2024, we've also been asked by the Commission to work on these statelessness recommendations, which I should say have been under development for a longer time than EGRIS has officially been working on this, because there was already a lot of good work being done by a number of now our current members to initiate the process back in 2019. Next slide, please. I think I'll skip this and go to the next one as well. Thanks. The expert group is currently includes 54 countries. So we're a large group and we're a very global group, as you can see from the picture on the screen there. We have 54 country members, and we have around 34, 35, I think, international and regional organizations. So these are the members of the group, and the way we work with our membership is a very inclusive and participatory process. So whether we're working on capacity development or whether we're working on statelessness recommendations, we involve our members, we establish kind of subgroups, technical subgroups that work on specific tasks and on joint work plans. In relation to the work on statelessness statistics, 21 members out of our 54 country members are taking part in that subgroup, have been actively engaging alongside 11 regional and international organizations. So the countries and organizations that you can see there on the left hand of the slide, these are the EGRIS members who have been engaged specifically in the work of EGRIS, in the work of the IROSS, but the broader membership of EGRIS is very, welcome to participate, to review, to engage. These are the members who have, put up their hands, if you like, to contribute to this process. Next slide, please. So what is the IROSS? Sometimes it's important to clarify, probably with this group here. It's very obvious and clear already what international statistical recommendations are, but often I'm in places or have questions that really flag to me that the scope of the work is important to reiterate. So I apologize if this is too basic, but in my experience, it's good to lay the groundwork also. It's a set of international recommendations that will be, we hope, endorsed by the Statistical Commission next year, and therefore will join a group of very many other international recommendations on how countries should produce statistics on different issues at the national level. They have been developed, or they are under development, would be more correct to say, with a number of affected countries, so countries who are currently tackling, addressing and improving data on stateless populations in their own country, as we just heard from the case of Rwanda, and also a number of international and regional experts or stakeholders who are also engaged in this work. The recommendations are focused on the target audience is countries, is national statistical systems and participants thereof. So we are focusing very much on the production of official statistics. Obviously, in an area like statelessness, as was the case for refugees and IDPs, there are also many stakeholders in the area who are not necessarily, part of those national systems, working in non-governmental organizations, working in CSOs, and these organizations also, in many cases, sit on a lot of data, or are producing quite interesting data that is also, relevant to look at and to benefit from under the right conditions. So the target audience of this is very much countries and national systems, but we are, of course, and the recommendations are not blind to, the fact that there are interesting data sources elsewhere. So the scope has a little bit of grey area in the sense of in the sense that there's a wider target audience and interested stakeholder community for this purpose, but the primary audience is very much countries and their national statistical systems. Next slide, please. Why is the IROSS needed, or why was the IROSS needed? I mean, first of all, because it didn't exist. So there are a huge amount of data quality, comparability challenges, lack of a common statistical framework to guide countries on producing statistics on these and related population groups. So we are very much hoping that introducing such a clear statistical framework and guidance will be a key milestone in terms of improving this data quality and comparability across contexts in the future. We believe it's in promoting inclusion, obviously not on its own, but as a tool in contexts where there is the political will and interest to make use of them, as we just heard a very concrete example of already. But we're very much hoping that this will be an additional, resource or tool in those contexts to promote inclusion in this way. It builds upon the successes of the refugee and the IDP recommendations that the EGRIS also had a hand in producing. When I say success, I don't mean here the fact that they exist, but we are seeing more and more countries, more and more different contexts and countries in different regions making use of these. So improving how refugees are included in their national census, improving how IDPs are included in national surveys, improving the use of administrative data to produce statistics on these population groups. So we're seeing a lot of successes since the endorsement of the statistical recommendations on refugees and IDPs, and we are hoping that this third set will follow in their footsteps. It's also important to remember, of course, UNHCR's international mandate, which includes the compilation of data, and countries report data to UNHCR. And we are, of course, very much hoping that a clear international framework will also facilitate that process. Next slide, please. As I said before, the work is not necessarily new, and it's also not all of EGRIS's to EGRIS's credit. EGRIS got involved a little bit midway through the process, but the work started back in 2019, where an expert group meeting met in Bangkok, and the invitation of UNHCR and UNFPA to really discuss, the value of such an endeavor. Do we need this? How should we do it? How could it be useful? Is it possible? These are the kind of questions that were being asked in 2019, with very positive answers across the board. So the work very much got started by essentially an interested group of countries and stakeholders to kickstart the work and thinking through what would need to be included and starting to draft different sections. In 2021, it was formally included in the EGRIS's terms of reference. So we brought the issue to the Commission, and the Commission formally extended our terms of reference to include this commitment more explicitly. And of course, we are working now, and since then we've been working very actively through a members meeting in Copenhagen this year, where we got together around 40 or so different stakeholders to really answer some difficult questions together and progress the work. But we've also been working offline and remotely, very much with the different partners involved to bring the draft, or to get the draft ready for the global consultation that is actually starting today. Next slide, please. What I wanted to share here was a little bit what you can expect to find in the draft. It is a long document. It's just over 100 pages. It's a comprehensive set of recommendations. But just to give you a quick tour of what you can find in there, this and a couple more slides will hopefully help. Introduction sets out the why is this needed, and the how was it produced. The first substantive chapter lays out the legal framework and also key definitions from an international, from the perspective of international law, and how this plays out in practice. So looking at, of course, the impact of statelessness and similar situations on affected populations and the like. It's a short chapter. It's not a statistical recommendations chapter, but it's providing the context within which the recommendations have been produced. The third chapter develops then a statistical framework in line with or based on the legal framework presented in the previous chapter, and outlines the definitions, explains or elaborates on the key definitions that are associated with that framework for the purpose of statistical measurement. Section 4 and 5 then get into more practicalities in terms of, okay, what exactly needs to be collected and what precise statistics should be produced, but also looking at how data sources, both traditional data sources and non-governmental data sources, could be made use of, or could be adapted or could be capitalized on for fulfilling this framework, right? For producing the statistics that are outlined in chapters 3 and 4. Chapter 6, although at the end is definitely not the least important in any way. It's actually quite a critical chapter that looks at the issues of statistical coordination. It focuses, of course, on the national level, looking at the national system, but also taking a slightly broader data ecosystem lens, as I was explaining a little bit earlier. And then importantly, it also takes into consideration regional coordination and the impact that this can have, and of course, international consultations and processes. As we just heard from Venant, they can also have a critical momentum building effect. Building political census at the regional level can have a big, significant impact in terms of national processes also. Next slide, please. Into a little bit more detail then, the statelessness statistical framework as presented in chapter 3 can be more or less summarized by this visual, which looks in the red-orange color there at the kind of core population groups. So those who are stateless and have their statelessness status recognized by national authorities, and those who are also stateless but might not have that status recognized because of various for various reasons, but also other people who may have difficulty proving their nationality, right? So it might be in this at-risk group. So the category A and category B are included in order to ensure that no one is really falling through the gaps here in the framework. In blue, the recommendations also take into consideration that statelessness also impacts people who are not stateless or who are no longer stateless, i.e. those who may be descended from stateless persons, those who may be residing and living with stateless persons, those who may be previously stateless persons, and it still may have an impact on their living conditions, on their access to rights, to services, on their vulnerabilities overall. And I think importantly, down the bottom, as you can see, each of the relevant categories is then further subdivided into those who were born those who are native born, so those who are born in the country where they're living, and those who are born elsewhere. And this is an important thing to highlight because we have tried throughout the recommendations to ensure alignment as much as possible, to ensure alignment, I should say, with existing international recommendations, whether they be on migration, whether they be on CRBS, whether they be on population and housing census. The recommendations are not developed in a vacuum, they're developed to complement existing recommendations that are already in place for these important processes and systems. Next slide, please. So I think looking at time, I'll skip over the next 2 slides because I've already given you a sneak preview of the most important part of what's in the recommendations and take you to a little bit around next steps and the global consultations. So where we're at now, on the 24th of October, we are opening the global consultation, and it will be open till the 21st of November. This is formally being facilitated by the UN Statistical Division, and last week there was a letter that came from the Director of the UN Statistical Division to all NSOs of UN member states to invite them to participate. But we are also through in the EGRIS Secretariat, as we are kind of hosting the global consultation on our website, we are also opening it wider than that, making sure that statelessness experts, civil society organizations, other people and other institutions are aware of and welcome to contribute to this online consultation process. This will end on the 21st of November. There will not be any flexibility around the deadline. So please, if you are interested to engage, do discuss this with your colleagues and with your partners, and make sure to coordinate those efforts to meet that deadline. Afterwards, we will be with our EGRIS members that I had on the screen earlier. We will essentially be digesting all of the input that we received and finding the best way to address it in a final draft that will be submitted to the Statistical Commission in January. So it's quite a tight time frame and timeline that we all have. This is important that we're able to share the final draft for consideration of Commission representatives in March. Then I think the very last slide, we go just one more. Is really just to summarize this last the last kind of practical points around the global consultation, and I would just like to end by really encouraging you to take part in this process. I can see from what we've from how we've come so far that we only, this process only benefits from input, small and large, from a wide variety of stakeholders and national experts. So really strongly encouraging you to have a look and send us feedback. We welcome it with open arms. Let me stop there and hand back over to Rachel, and thank you very much. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks very much, Natalie, and thank you for keeping to time, and thank. I don't know, Venant, if you can also put your camera on so we can see you, that would be lovely. We've got quite a lot of people online, so we've got a great opportunity to actually ask questions. I see there was one already in the chat bar, so I don't know if we could first of all handle that one, but as we, Venant is answering that question, can others please have a think about any specific questions you would like to ask or any comments as well? So please do kind of get ready, and if you don't ask any, I might have to start picking on people. So now's your chance. So Venant, can you just, there was one particular question here from Chao Huang who was asking birth registration for refugees in Rwanda. Is that conducted by UNHCR? Or is it conducted by the Rwandan government? Thanks.
Thank you, Rachel. In Rwanda, even if people in a refugees camp have a particular status, the birth registration is done by the official of the government. It is not a UNHCR which is doing the birth registration. If an agent from the government of Rwanda working on refugees camps, that's required to register any birth at a national territory. And it is a web-based application. It is a web-based application that's we see the information from National Statistical Office, National Identification Agents, but also other partners countrywide.
Thank you. Very nice and clear. So Tanya also had a question. Are there any, for you, Natalia, are there any particular elements of the recommendations that you're expecting to receive more comments on, or perhaps as well that you'd like more comments on? Thanks.
Yes, thank you for the question, and also for the additional one there, Rachel, because there's two different answers. I think I mean what I'm expecting to receive input on would be the framework itself, and because there's new language included in it, right? The chapter 2, which looks at the legal framework, has the convention, the definition from the Statelessness Convention, but also speaks to a category of people who are called of undetermined nationality. Which is an operational language that UNHCR has used and many countries are using, but the statistical framework has adjusted this slightly because those definitions weren't necessarily fully suited to the statistical framework. So there is some new language included there where we look at unrecognized nationality status, and we try to articulate, how that can be defined through different classificatory variables, right? Which variables countries should collect to be able to classify these population groups. So chapter 3 and 4, there's a lot of new material that's been introduced, and I do expect there to be some feedback on these. Where I would like feedback on, it maybe has a slightly different answer. Where I would like feedback on is, very much on chapters 4 and 5. Which are the data sources chapter, how the data should be collected, but also the statistical coordination chapter, right? Because there are, we're very aware that there are a range of there's different capacity in different regions and in different countries. There are the different strengths of different data sources in different places, particularly when it comes to, administrative data sources and how rich they can potentially be for this population. So I would like, particularly coming from different regions around the world, really to learn more about whether the recommendations are meaningful from this variety of different perspectives. So yeah, I would very much like more feedback on the how, but I'm expecting feedback on the what. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And just a reminder then to all of the countries that are joining us online, this really is your opportunity, as we're hearing. It's your opportunity to actually kind of shape the framework, the guidance, but really also to kind of share what you're doing as well. Is it actually helpful to you? Are there things that are missing? Are there things that actually don't make sense possibly in your context, or things where you'd want additional information or kind of clarification around particular concepts? With all guidance, it really needs that input at the country level. It's not till you kind of actually talk to countries about the specifics that you really get into that level of detail to know what do you really need. It's very difficult for me to see who is online, but there were definitely a few of the countries that have been involved in the consultations already. So I don't know if any of them wanted to share as well about any of their kind of engagement or any reflections on that. If you want to put your hands up, we can then unmute you and even put on the video so we can see you. There's another question here. Will there be a technical report on statistics on statelessness as well? I guess that's to you as well, Natalia.
Interpreting the question how I am, we had for the work on IDPs, we had first a technical report, which really looked at a kind of stock taking of current practice, and then this was then further developed to inform the recommendations. So if the question is meant in this regard, will there be a similar kind of second document on statelessness? No, that's not being planned. That's not currently in scope and in the work plan. For a number of reasons. There were some very specific reasons why it happened for IDPs, primarily around lack of it wasn't particularly clear what our mandate was on that topic in the first kind of phase of EGRIS. So in order to do something concrete, but without necessarily clear guidance on what was expected, we decided to develop a technical report. So there was very specific things around that process, which haven't really happened this time round. So no, what we are expecting is to develop to deliver the recommendations. And then when we take this to the Commission in March next year, the idea is that if the recommendations are welcomed or are endorsed at the international level, then we would also, ask the Commission to essentially extend our mandate further so that the EGRIS can be able to integrate this into the rest of our work, whether it's around capacity building, promotion, dissemination, or other activities. We're also looking to continue to engage. So our work on statelessness doesn't end in March 2023 with the hopeful endorsement. We do expect and hope it to continue with, of course, continuing to engage with regional bodies like yours in Asia Pacific, and of course very much with country and national partners too.
Thank you so much. I can't see any other hands up from what I'm seeing, although I could be missing them, but I'm sure somebody from my team would tell me if I'd missed them. And I haven't got any more questions in the chat function, but we are just coming up to the end of the time. So let me just finish with really saying a huge thank you, particularly thank you to Vivant for really sharing that practical level, what you've been doing in Rwanda. And I think what it really shows us is that actually, if you've got that political will and the engagement, that actually you can really make progress on these difficult issues. So we really appreciate you sharing, very openly about what you're doing and about the challenges that you're facing on that. And we do wish you huge success as well as you kind of go forward with that work, and it'll be interesting to see how that proceeds. So thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Great.
I will.
And Natalia, thank you so much as well for sharing, on what's actually being done. And let me also say to everyone else, please, this is your opportunity. Please do engage with the new guidance. Like I said, make sure you kind of adhere to the timeline, just that, they do have a deadline for getting an input, but it really does help to get that input at country level. So please do share with that. And also for anybody who's actually at UN Stats Commission next year, you get that opportunity to attend a side event, hopefully in person, or if there's a virtual one, I don't know quite how we're doing those, but there's an opportunity there as well. And so this definitely, as we know, isn't the end of the work. This is very much about, just one stage in taking the work forward. But this is a huge issue that we know lots of countries are working on, and we really appreciate all your input and active participation today. So huge thank you to the speakers, but also for all the participants as well. Thanks for being with us today. And if I was really organised, I'd be able to tell you about the next Stats Cafe, but clearly I'm not quite as organised, or maybe, but I will rely on the team to let you know about our next one. But thanks everyone for today. Great to have you all. Thanks so much.